I'm going to start out by going through the fraction review. The fraction review should help you when you go to take your test. If you go through this and you have any more questions, please feel free to email me or come see me in the morning and I can answer them before you take your final checkup. To remember multiplying fractions, remember we went through the song and it goes, multiplying fractions, no big problem. Top times top over bottom times bottom. The reason that I put this at the beginning is so that when you go to multiply fractions, you follow these simple rules. So when I come down to question 2 and I go to multiply my fractions, I'm first going to look across the diagonals and see if there's anything I can reduce. With the 1 and the 4, there's nothing I can reduce. With the 5 and the 3, there's nothing I can reduce. So I'm going to multiply top times top, gives me 5. Bottom times bottom, gives me 12. 5/12 is in simplest form, so I could circle my answer. When I move on to question 3, you'll notice that across the 7 and the 9, there's nothing I can reduce. But with the 4 and the 4, I ask myself, what goes into both 4 and 4? And that's 4. So 4 goes into 4 once. I'm going to reduce that. 4 goes into 4 once. I'm going to reduce that. And now I can multiply top times top. Now it's 1 times 7 to give me 7, and 9 times 1 to give me 9. Now my solution is in simplest form. If, however, I had not reduced at the beginning, I could do top times top, which would give me 28, and bottom times bottom, which would give me 36. But at this point, my fraction is not in simplest form, and if you look at the directions, it says to put it in simplest form. So what I would have to do is I'd have to, at the very end, divide both the top and the bottom by 4, which would reduce down to 7/9. I don't care which way you do it, but you want to make sure that you're following directions and keeping your answer in simplest form. When I go to question 4, you're going to notice a slight difference, and that is that 1, we have integers, I see a negative number, and 2, negative 2 isn't a fraction. So to make something a fraction, we're going to put it over 1. So now we have our two fractions, and we can look to reduce. I prefer to rewrite so that everything is lined up a little bit better. So now I look, the 3 and the 1, there's nothing I can reduce. The 2 and the 7, there's nothing I can reduce. So when I do top times top, I have negative 2 times 3, which would give me a negative 6, and 1 times 7 would give me a positive 7. So my answer is negative 6/7. With question 5, a lot of times people forget that negative symbol there because it's so close to the fraction. So what I tell people to do to make sure that they remember is extend this line across and just bring the negative sign to the top so we don't forget about it. So then when I look to my diagonals, the 3 and the 5, there's nothing I can reduce. But with the 2 and the 4, I can ask myself what goes into 2 and into 4, and that would be 2. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 2 goes into 2 once, but we have to remember to keep that negative sign there with it. So now I do top times top, negative 1 times 5 is negative 5, and bottom times bottom, 3 times 2 gives us a positive 6. My answer is in simplest form. Okay, when we get to questions 6 and 7, you're going to notice that we have mixed numbers. Before we can do anything, we must change all of the mixed numbers into improper fractions. So 4 times 1 gives me 4, plus 1 gives me 5/4, and I have to remember to bring that negative sign with. The negative sign doesn't come into effect until the very end. Now I'm going to multiply by 9 over 1. I'm changing 9 into a fraction. This diagonal doesn't reduce, and then the 4 and the 9 do not reduce either. So I multiply top times top, gives me negative 45. Bottom times bottom gives me 4. At this point, because the top is bigger than the bottom, I have to ask myself, how many times does 4 fit into 45? 4 fits into 45 11 times, and that takes us to 44. So I have 1 left over. I keep my denominator the same, and I can't forget to bring my negative sign in front of everything. Some people have a tendency to put it just before that fraction. You want to make sure it's in front of everything, or it might be read wrong. For number 7, the first thing we have to do is change to improper. 3 times 2 is 6. plus 2 is 8, so we have 8 over 3. We have to remember to apply our negative sign. Times 4 times 10 is 40, plus 1 is 41, so we have 41 over 10. If we look across our diagonals with the 3 and the 41, there's nothing we can reduce, but with the 8 and the 10, 2 can go into both of those. So I'm going to change, 2 goes into 10 5 times, 2 goes into 8 4 times. Remember, we have to keep our negative sign with that. So now I can see the bottom times bottom is going to give me 15, but on the top times top, I'm going to come down here, or just off to the side, and do 41 times 4. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 4 is 16, and I have to keep my negative sign, so I have negative 164. So I have to ask myself, how many times does 15 go into 164? Here's my strategy. I know 15 times 10 is going to give me 150. So I know it has to go in more than 10 times. But to figure out how many more, I'm going to see, with 150, can I add in another 15 to make it 11 times? That gives me 165, so that's too much. So it's not going to go in an additional time, so it's going to go in 10 times. 10 times 15 gave us 150, so we have 14 leftovers. We keep our denominator the same, and what can't I forget? If we look up there, we have a negative sign. So our correct answer is negative 10 and 14/15. So we're going to switch modes a little bit. We're going to go to our song again. Think about what we have to remember. It says dividing fractions easy as pie. We need to remember to flip the second and multiply. And what that means is we need to take our second fraction, and if it were 1/2, we have to flip that, make it the reciprocal, which would be 2 over 1, and now instead of having a division sign, it would become a multiplication sign. Again, I put the directions here so that we remember when we're doing our dividing fractions problems, this is exactly what we need to make sure that we do every single time. Okay, so here we go. We have our first example. We need to remember to flip the second, so I'm going to do that right away, and multiply. I'm just going to copy down the rest of my problem because the rest of the problem does not change. Now that it's become a multiplication problem, we do the exact same thing that we were doing on the last 8 problems. So I'm going to look at my diagonal, see if I can reduce, and I can't. So now I do top times top, negative 4, over bottom times bottom, 35. My answer is in simplest form. Now with number 10, what I need to remember is that since the 2 is not a fraction, I'm going to make it a fraction before I flip and multiply. So now that I have made 2 into a fraction, 2 over 1, I'm going to flip it and change it to multiplication, and I'm going to bring down the rest of my problem. So now I look at my diagonal. I can't reduce here, and I can't reduce here. So top times top gives me negative 9. Bottom times bottom gives me positive 10. Just like with multiplying fractions, before we can do anything with mixed numbers, we must change to improper. So 9 times 3 is 27, plus 5 is going to give us 32 over 9. And right now, it's divided by 3 over 1, so I'm going to flip the second and multiply. If I look here, 9 and 1 can't reduce, 32 and 3 can't reduce, so I do top times top, 32. Bottom times bottom is 27. Since the top is bigger than the bottom, I ask how many times does 27 fit into 32, which is once. And we have 5 left over out of 27. With number 12, we're going to change to improper. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 6 is 13 over 7. Now, I'm going to change this one up top so I don't forget, which is 5 times 4 is 20, plus 3 is going to be 23/4. And I can't forget to flip the second before I multiply. Now, if you look here, 7 and 4 do not reduce, and 13 and 23 do not reduce. So I'm going to go off to the side here. I'm going to choose a different color to do 13 times 4, which is 52. And then I have to do 23 times 7, 14, 15, 16, which gives me 161. Now I have to reduce if possible, which it is not possible. I'm going to... Okay, so with this next one, we have to remember part of our song. It says, when adding up or taking away fractions, don't be a hater. Bottom numbers gotta be the same common denominator. Before we can add or subtract fractions, we need to have a common denominator. So when we go through these next couple examples, you're going to want to make sure that you find a common denominator before you add or subtract. And you want to be very careful to make sure you're following what the sign says to do. You'll notice down at the bottom I have a spot listed for multiples. If you're not sure where the two meet up, start listing your multiples. So for number 14, I've got 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 42. I'm going to stop. Hopefully they meet up before then. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28. You'll notice that they meet up at 28. So what needs to happen is I need to rename both of these fractions with a denominator of 28. So something over 28 plus something over 28 equals something over 28. So I need to figure out how do I get from 7 to 28. If I look down here, you'll see that I multiplied by 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have to multiply by 4 here, and what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. 8 times 4 gives me 32. So then I ask myself, how do I get from 4 to 28? I multiplied by 7. And 7 times 7 would give me 49. So I have basically just to look at this simple math, 32 plus 49, which gives me 81. So I have 81 over 28. Since the top is bigger than the bottom, I have to ask myself how many times does 28 fit into 81? Well, I know 28 times 2 is going to give me 56. So I'm going to just see if I can add in one more 28 to get to 81, and I can't. It only takes me to 84, which is too much, which means 28 fits in there 2 times. And I'm going to do 81 minus 56 to figure out how much I have left over. That leaves me with 25 over, leave my denominator the same, 28. Final answer. Now with number 15, I'm looking for a common denominator between 2 and 8. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. And then when I list my multiples of 8, I'm already there. So my common denominator here is going to be 8. Notice it's a subtraction sign, so we don't want to forget something over 8 minus something over 8 equals something over 8. To get from 2 to 8, I have to multiply by 4, so I'm going to do that on the top. 3 times 4 is 12. And now the second fraction is already over 8, so I technically only need to multiply by 1, or if you realize this, you just leave it the same. Now here we have 12 minus 15. You'll notice that we're taking away more than we had. With subtracting integers, remember to keep it, change it, flip it. 12 plus negative 15 is going to give us a negative 3/8. Final answer. Moving on to the next one, number 16, you'll notice that negative 3 isn't yet a fraction, so I'm going to make it a fraction by putting it over 1. So now to list our multiples, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I notice that they meet up right away at 7. So it's going to be something over 7, it's a plus sign, plus something over 7 equals something over 7. The first fraction to get from 1 to 7, we multiply by 7. Negative 3 times 7 is negative 21. The second fraction's already over 7, so we're going to leave it the same. So we're dealing with negative 21 plus 1. So we've got to subtract them because they're different signs, which gives me 20. And there are more negatives than positives. We get negative 20 over 7, which means it goes in 2 times. That takes us to 14, with 6 leftovers. Leave our denominator the same, and our answer is negative. With problems like number 17, remember I told you to extend the line across, bring the negative sign to the top. We have to find our common denominator, so 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 42, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. Again, just like the other one that had 4 and 7, our common denominator is 28. So we have something over 28 plus something over 28 equaling something over 28. To get from 7 to 28, we had to multiply by 4. Negative 8 times 4 is negative 32. To get from 7 to 28, we multiply by 7. 7 times 7 is 49. Now the only difference between this one and the last problem is that we actually have addition of different signs. So one's positive, one's negative. So this time I have to subtract. 49 minus 32 is going to give me 17. There are more positives, so it stays positive. So I have 17 over 28 for my final answer. With our last two, you're going to see that we do have some mixed numbers on number 19. Number 18, we just follow the same rules. Extend this line across, bring the negative to the top, and make negative 2 a fraction. We have to find our common denominator, which I can see this right away, is going to be 3. Something over 3, it's a plus sign. Something over 3 equals something over 3. To get from 1 to 3, we multiply by 3. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. The second fraction needs to stay the same. And negative 6 plus negative 2 is negative 8. Because the top's bigger than the bottom, 3 goes into 8 twice with 2 leftovers, and our answer is negative. The last problem, all we have to do is we have to change to improper. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7 over 6. We leave our negative, plus 8 times 3 is 24, plus 1 is 25 over 8. We find our common denominator, 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, and with 8 we have 8, 16, 24. Here's where they meet up. So I'm going to do something over 24 plus something over 24 equals something over 24. To get from 6 to 24, we multiply by 4. Negative 7 times 4 is negative 28. To get to 8, from 8 to 24, we multiply by 3. 25 times 3 is 75. Because it's addition with different signs, we actually end up subtracting. 75 minus 28. 15 minus 8 is 7. 6 minus 2 is 4. So we end up with 47 over 24. 24 goes into 47 one time with 23 leftovers. I hope this review helped, and if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at sullivana@milton.k12.wi.us. Thank you.